The Joe Davies Report. I'm your host, Joe Davies, a politician who talks about the media. Joined by guest Kevin List, who's here today. Kevin is a former parliamentary advisor to Russell Norman, a New Zealand citizen born and bred in Christchurch, and a qualified teacher. He has also recently become an editor for scoop.co.nz. Kevin, what is Scoop?
Scoop's a little independent media organisation. And can I pull you up on one thing there, Mr. Davies? Yes. I was born in Timaru, but I was bred in Christchurch or Canterbury, also known as Otautahi. And can I say kia ora to all the listeners? And if you're a New Zealand First supporter, hello.
So back to the query. What is Scoop?
Back to the query. So Scoop's a little independent news organisation which was formed by a couple of journalists. I think one of its offshoots is now Newsroom. So basically it started in a shed in Karori, Wellington, and that's where when I joined the team in the early noughties, I lived in the shed, was chained to a desk and put up a lot of press releases, and occasionally they'd let me out, go and cover Helen Clark press conferences.
And so 20 years later, you've been approached and they've said, hey, Kevin, would you like to be on the editorial board?
I've got a little bit of free time. Went back and did a teaching qualification, and I thought it's kind of fun. It's a little hobby of mine, politics, and it's not too much time. Basically, I'm organising a couple of stories, a couple of podcasts, and chatting about politics.
So essentially, Scoop is a website, a digital news platform.
Yeah, scoop.co.nz for the listeners.
So I'm just looking at it here. So it is a social enterprise site with a small team. It's wholly owned by the Scoop Foundation for Public Interest Journalism, a not-for-profit charitable trust established in 2015. So you've just started a podcast called Politics from Canterbury that you are posting onto YouTube.
We post it onto YouTube, then it goes on Scoop. So it's on Scoop, so it's easier to find if you go to Scoop. There'll be at least one of them.
What is the podcast about?
Okay, the basic idea of the podcast is I saw a lot of different podcasts around New Zealand, didn't see anything from the Canterbury region, and I'm a passionate supporter of the Canterbury region. So I basically thought, let's start a podcast and talk high-quality, intelligent conversation with different people.
So we're talking like 15-minute clips?
We're trying to be about 7 to 10 minutes because some of the other podcasts I do myself, I'm a political junkie or geek. I don't mainline politics into my arm. But I think I do follow Bomber Bradbury's podcast, The Working Group. It's quite long though. It's a real hour and 10 minutes. So I'm not sure everyone wants to spend an hour and 10 minutes. So mine's about 7 to 10 minutes. Hours.
Who are you trying to reach?
Anyone that's interested in politics. It's basically that little niche of people that are real political geeks to look at the media, look at different stories. I did a recent story about Radio New Zealand's. This is an example. Radio New Zealand's put out a podcast about disinformation and misinformation. In the podcast, they've included a clip of Winston Peters and a clip of David Seymour on their Twitter feed. So the video went out, and then being a political geek, I noticed later on that David Seymour had been excised from the actual clip. So I put that up as interesting because to me it looks like someone in ACT has rung up Radio New Zealand saying it's election year. What the heck are you doing putting me in this disinformation podcast?
So are you wanting to educate people? Are you wanting to take people on a journey? Are you trying to influence people politically?
Just trying to have a laugh and talk about politics and all the other good things, Joe.
What makes New Zealand or what makes Canterbury politics special?
Well, Canterbury is quite a centre-left city. I mean, most of the MPs...
Canterbury is not a city.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. That's excellent. The Canterbury region, actually, the city is quite centre-left. Just outside, it's quite blue, quite national. So we've got Selwyn. So it's just a sort of varied region, and basically... The South Island's quite different. If you're living in Wellington, you honestly would probably think the next government's going to be run by James Shaw and Marama Davidson because it's very sort of green voting. Christchurch has just got a different vibe. After 15 years in Wellington, you come back to Christchurch, it's got a different vibe, and the idea is to just try and kick that vibe out into the wider nation.
What else is going on in the media landscape of New Zealand at the moment?
Well, the media landscape just got a lot poorer because the Public Interest Journalism Fund ran out this week, but there's quite a few journalists that were trained in that, and they're still around for the next couple of years on these schemes. The big thing in the media landscape is the rise of small independent organisations like Sean Plunkett. He used to present Morning Report, then he was in Kiwi FM. He's now got a show called The Platform that's taking off quite well. Over more on the fringe, you've got Reality Check Radio, where you've got people like Rodney Hyde, who used to be the ACT Party leader, as a host of it. Peter Williams, who I used to listen to on summer days. Do you remember? Peter Williams was a cricket broadcaster. He's also on Reality Check Radio. And for those real political niche types, they've got a guy called Cameron Slater who put a blog out called Whale Oil that was famous a little bit ago, and he's also on that. So I think it's splintered.
So the rise of the platform, it seems to have happened relatively quickly the last couple of years, getting coverage on YouTube, getting quite a few views for what they are in terms of a streaming platform within New Zealand political space. The kind of guests that he's been getting on, from the right, from the centre right, but it's definitely noticeable that he is platforming, giving people the ability to talk in a free and frank manner from the right. Do you think that this group of people have had a platform in recent times?
Yes, but he also has Ingrid Leary from Labour, I believe, does turn up occasionally. So not entirely, but almost entirely. And that's because I believe Sean Plunkett said, look, Labour and Greens, you can come on, but probably somewhere in the comms team said, don't go on that show.
But for example, he had Roger Douglas on last week, someone whom is famous within New Zealand politics, and someone who you don't hear from very often. There he is speaking for 20 minutes about his views on the state of New Zealand at the moment. Is this a new...
Well, actually, the reason he had Roger Douglas on was because Roger Douglas wrote an article, and then the Herald picked I think Roger Douglas sent an article or some sort of his summation of politics now. Roger Douglas, for those who don't know, used to be a Labour cabinet minister, and then in the 1990s was one of the founders of the ACT Party and is very much in the neoliberal school of economics. Anyway, Roger Douglas wrote an article where he gave the impression that he wasn't entirely happy with his current party ACT. Where I found interesting was, if you read the article in the Herald, you would think, is Roger Douglas going to vote for ACT? Whereas if you actually listen to the 20 minutes on the platform, you realise that it was more publicity and Roger Douglas probably was going to vote for ACT.
Okay. So we've seen the rise of this right-wing media, this fringe media. Obviously, we've got groups like Voices for Freedom who have their own media platform, coming now more into the mainstream, more into the centre. I would contest that the centre-right media body in this country is radio. It's News Talk ZB, it's Mike Hosking, it's Heather Duplessis Allen, and it's the softer right of James Daniels and Simon Barnett.
Yeah, Canterbury represent. Thank you very much, Joe, for mentioning Canterbury. For those listening from Canterbury, big shout out to James Daniels and Simon Barnett, classics.
Your centre left, Scoop is centre left. Who else is in the centre-left media landscape?
I'm trying to hit right in the middle these days. I'm trying to move from the left into the
Scoop.
Right to that middle.
Anyway, regardless of what you're doing, Scoop is undoubtedly centre-left or left. But anyway, who else is in the left or the centre-left landscape?
Well, I think people would accuse News Hub, TV3, of being quite centre-left. And obviously the right would obviously also accuse probably most state-run media, because the state-run media by its very nature is, the left is about increasing the state, and historically throughout the world. So state-run media is seen by those on the centre-right as being inherently left-wing, even if it is or isn't.
So we've traversed through internet sites, we've come down to television and to radio. What about print media? What about written media?
Well, that's an interesting thing, because it was always I was always of the opinion that the press was a bit of a stuffy old sort of a classic centre-right paper. These days, with the new editorship and stuff, I would say it is towards the centre-left. There was a cartoon which I highlighted to you, and we don't have it with us today.
We can see it. Here it is.
Yeah, there's a cartoon, and it was so overtly centre-left, and most of the reporters or opinion pieces are centre-left, apart from Mike Yardley, still fighting as hard as he can for the centre-right in Canterbury.
I mean, let's just have a look at this cartoon for a minute, okay? Because it does seem to be overtly political.
Well, it's a political cartoon. And it's got the Greens are running in the front. They've got Te Pāti Māori. And it's kind of the cartoon's implying that what smaller parties are taking it away. But where's David Seymour in that? Where's Winston in that cartoon? Nowhere to be seen.
Because we see, some media is overtly political. But, the heart of journalism, aside from soapboxing, opinion piecing, so much of Western media outside of New Zealand is opinion.
Because it's cheaper.
Would you have seen this cartoon 10 years ago, Kevin?
Well, you may have, but in a student newspaper. I think that's maybe because I came from the student media years ago, and a lot of the people out there, like Bomber Bradbury, came from the student media. I believe Tova O'Brien was working at Radioactive. Sorry, I've forgotten the name of the lady that presents TV3 with orange hair. She came from the student media as well. So there's a lot of people come from the student media that are in the actual mainstream media now.
Yeah, and to be fair, there has been political cartoons. I mean, that is a place where people can say the ridiculous. If we think of, some people in the past in New Zealand, and cartoons have got that. But often they attack policy. Often cartoon, it's the Joker. They attack the crown. They attack the head, the government, etc. But to paint a tortoise of the Green Party toddling its way to victory.
Well, there's a cartoonist, I think, in Fairfax stuff, Sharon Edmund, and it comes across as more a defender of the government. So this is the interesting thing with a lot of cartoons. Even if you were centre-left, you'd be slagging the government. Like Trace Hodgson, he was a favourite cartoonist of mine. He would often just paint these ridiculous cartoons of, I guess, Mike Moore and whoever was around on the centre-left. And I think he himself is centre-left, but he would basically slag them off. So that's what's slightly different in the world of cartooning that I've noticed. But
awesome. Well, thank you, Kevin. I think that we've just started to scratch the surface of the landscape in New Zealand media, so I'd like to get you back on to go a bit further and a bit deeper with it. But just very finally, what's your goal? What's your ambition for where politics from Canterbury is going to be in 5 years' time?
Probably, hopefully, quite a lot of humour. Like, we try and bring a bit of humour to this. It's not super serious. It's a little bit lighthearted.
Do you think it's going to still be rocking out content in 5 years?
We might go more local government. We're covering national politics at the moment, but we'll spread out and cover some local government too.
But will you be around in 5 years?
Well, if I'm still alive and can, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
We don't rely on